you, Mr. Ali. Okay, well, imagine a world that was volatile, uncertain, and unforgiving. A world where work and life and survival were entwined, where your membership of the tribe was based on your unique skill set and operating at the highest level of performance, where every day feels as if you're going to take a life-changing exam, where your primary fuel is cortisol and adrenaline, where the snap of a twig or the faint growling of a bear might spell disaster for the tribe. A world where essentially you are having to operate at the top of your cognitive capacity day in, day out. Welcome, my friends, to the digital age and to our new life. As mentioned, I'm Ade McCormack, and I focus on helping organizations thrive in the digital age. My hypothesis, which I'm going to share with you today, is that much of the change that we're experiencing in the world today is anthropological in nature. And if you embrace this anthropological reality, you'll be in a great position to thrive in this post-industrial world. In this presentation, I'm going to talk about what I believe digital is, its impact on work, workers and leadership, its impact on culture and risk, and then I'll provide a business blueprint for businesses in the digital age, which you can use to increase your strategic and even economic relevance in the digital age. So, in terms of digital, again, I'm going to talk about what it is. And what I'm going to talk about goes back millions and millions of years. For the majority of that time, we have been hunter-gatherers. And if we go back far enough in time, there was a day when mankind picked up a rock for the purposes of doing something or someone. And on that day, mankind took control of his own destiny. On that day, mankind decided to become augmented. And on that day, the technology industry was created. If we fast forward from then, we have seen exponential growth in terms of technology. The wheel, the printing press, that ill-fitting exoskeleton that people refer to today as a car, the computer, and the mobile phone. In fact, today is a cause for celebration, because today is the fastest day we have ever experienced in terms of technology growth. But by the same token, it's the slowest day we will ever experience again. So the uncertainty and volatility that we're experiencing in the market today is simply a warm-up act for what is to come. I'm going to now look at the 4 stages of business evolution that we've seen over all time. The first stage was when we were hunter-gatherers. Biz 1.0, we were hunter-gatherers. We have spent the most of our time on the planet in this business model, so to speak. We were highly mobile. We pursued our food across the savannah. We were highly social. We hunted in packs because there was a real risk that food might eat us. If we hadn't eaten for several days and food appeared on the horizon at 6:01, we wouldn't leave it till the next day to pursue it. So work and life were highly integrated. The very nature of the prey required us to be highly creative and to make our own decisions in real time in terms of how we caught that prey. And no matter how hard we worked, if we came back to the cave with no food, it was a bad day at the office. Around 12,000 years ago, we settled by the oases, we tamed the animals, we tamed the seeds, so to speak, and essentially we became an agricultural culture. Again, we still had to be mobile, social. Animals don't give birth on a 9-to-5 basis, so work and life were highly integrated. Farming's a complex activity with many variables, so we had to be creative. We had to make decisions in real time, and now we had to make decisions about the future as well. And again, we were judged on our productivity. But then 200 years ago, something very significant happened. All of a sudden, mobility stopped. We had to turn up to the same factory. We had to stand or sit in the same place throughout the day. We were now paid labor, so there was no talking on the factory line, so no more sociality. We didn't enjoy what we did it for purely economic reasons. We looked forward to the end of the day, the end of the week, and the end of our lives. We created the concept of work-life balance to address this unhappiness in our life, so to speak. Because we were now factory workers, we had to follow the operations manual, and that meant no creativity, no decision making. We were cogs in the factory, in the corporate machine. And again, we were paid for our activity now, not our productivity. So some of us learned how to do as little as we possibly could, given that we were going to be paid a flat amount anyway. To counteract this worker laziness, the factory owners brought in their own equivalent of the military police, which today we refer to as management. Management back then existed to stop lazy workers from being lazy. But as we came towards the end of the industrial era, we saw mobility trying to push its way back into the organization. Mobile phones in the enterprise are an example of that. We saw social media push its way into the enterprise. If you don't have access to Facebook and LinkedIn in many organizations today, you won't attract young people. Many people want to have a more integrated work and life and to be judged by their performance, not by their activity. They want to make their own decisions. They want to be creative. It's in our nature. So what we're seeing with Biz 4.0 is essentially it's mankind's return to his true nature after 200 years of what you might call anthropological cruelty. What we're seeing are the vines of nature pushing through the concrete factory floor. Anthropologists will talk about this in years to come. They'll talk about the industrial era as being a bleak, short period in mankind's history when he was at his most disconnected from his true humanity. So for me, digital is not Industry 4.0. It's not the industrial era on tech steroids. It's got people at its core. It's about people returning to their true nature. And more people are looking for this, looking for their anthropological drivers to be met in the workplace. Again, these are mobility, sociality, work-life integration, creativity, decision-making, and productivity. And we'll look at a few more a little bit later. So let's have a look at this in terms of its impact on the world of work. Essentially, many of us still work for factories, even though there are no conveyor belts or hard hats or boiler suits. And we work for factories when the following criteria exist. When your organization is primarily focused on process engineering, that is indicative of an industrial era organization. When your organization makes its decisions with just one or two people in the organization, i.e. a centralized leadership model, then that's an industrial era organization. And an organization that believes that its success in the past are indicative of its success in the future, again, that no longer holds true, and that is carried by industrial era leaders, that belief. And that ties back to the first belief that our business model is sound. All we need to do is polish the processes and get them better and better. Well, the reality in the digital age is it's a case of disrupt or be disrupted. Process orientation is giving way to innovation orientation. And that innovation orientation is often data-driven in nature. Centralized leadership is giving way to decentralized leadership so that people in the field can make decisions around threats and opportunities in real time without having to ask permission of their boss and their boss's boss, so to speak. And certainty is giving way to chaos. And in essence, you can either play offensive or defensive here. If you play offensive, you'll create a business model that will take out your own business to some extent, but will take out the market as well. So you're kind of cannibalizing your own business, but you're doing so so that you stay alive, but others don't. Most of us will play defensive. We will run our existing business model for as long as we can. It might be another few years or another few weeks. We don't know. So to guard against that reality, we need to create other businesses. We need to have a portfolio of businesses, call them plan B, C, D, E, F, and so on. And these businesses are running alongside your plan A, your primary business, because at some point, the digital Grim Reaper will come into your reception, and at that point, one of these insurance bet businesses will become your primary business. So the business of being in business in the digital age is being in the business of creating new business models. So think polymodal business. Business leaders now have to get used to managing more than one business model. They've got to run it as a portfolio of bets or a set of insurance policies, so to speak. Looking at this from the labor perspective, from the worker's perspective, in the industrial era, we're paid labor. We've seen the automation of blue-collar work. We're now seeing the blue-collarization of white-collar work. So none of us are safe. The banks, they're in a race to the bottom in terms of automating everything. They'll get to a point where everything is automated. However, whilst they're 100% efficient, they'll be operating at approximately 0% margin because all the banks will be doing it. So they'll have to consider, how do we move back up the value stack again? And they will do so by reintroducing people. But these people won't be the cog workers of the industrial era. These people will be highly creative individuals whose thoughts and innovations give rise to high value customer experiences, high margin customer experiences. These people will be more like Lady Gaga, Salvador Dali, Pablo Picasso. Highly creative, but a HR nightmare. We're also seeing people changing their attitudes towards work. Work is not just a place you go to get to cover your expenses, to cover your lifestyle. Young people and old people alike are looking at their careers as a path to mastery. Why am I doing this? I've got a little bit of time to spend on the planet. I'm spending a lot of that time at work. It needs to have some sort of sense of purpose. I need to be doing something that, I don't know, extends my capabilities, shows my true potential, makes a dent in the universe. But increasingly what we're seeing is that people are looking at work beyond the economic. And that's a big challenge for organizations who have traditionally thrown money at the talent program, at the talent problem, so to speak. The challenge for organizations in the digital era is to create great environments to attract and retain great people who will do great work with other great people. The power axis is shifting from the employer to the employee, and that change in dynamic changes everything. If we look at this now from a leadership perspective, the old command and control model does not work. It leads to arthritic decision making. Focusing overly on the strategic plan is taking organizations in a path that deviates from reality. Strategy is happening now in real time. It's less about, shall we build a few pyramids, and that may take 100 years and will require a certain amount of labor and materials. It's becoming more like a dogfight, fighter pilots having to make decisions in real time, life and death situations continuously. That's what strategy looks like in the digital age. Smart organizations recognize that people are central to digital age business, and they will acquire these people not through the traditional buzzword bingo matching of here's a job spec to the recruitment company, handing a job spec to the recruitment company. That, job specs are essentially cog specs. You're looking for a part in a factory machine when you send out a job spec. Increasingly, it'll be the recruitment companies approaching the company, the customer, and saying, hey, take a look at this guy or lady. I think you will find them useful and interesting to your organization. The CEO might say, well, I'm not actually looking, but the recruiter says, take a look. The CEO looks at the resume and says, yes, they look quite good, but they spent some time in prison. And the recruiter says, yes, but she ran a gang, and they were a very successful gang. And then the CEO thinks to himself, well, we're looking for somebody to open up an office in a very tough neighborhood. This could be the person we're looking for. So my point here is that we'll increasingly be looking for people whose life histories are somewhat deviated from the traditional LinkedIn profile. Our life experiences, those experiences that we won't necessarily show off about on LinkedIn, are becoming increasingly part of our value proposition, as is our social capital, our LinkedIn connections, because these will add to the brain trust of the organization, the employer, as is our emotional intelligence and our humanity. As we move from cog workers to humans, we'll need to start thinking like humans again and providing services for other humans, not other cog workers, so to speak. Smart leaders are all about getting the obstacles out of the way so that great people can do great work. And if we were to look at nature and tribes in some detail, we would realize that those organizations do not themselves have one unique leader. They are typically council driven. They are typically situational in terms of who is the leader at a given point in time. The very nature of leadership is starting to look very different now. And what is definitely the case is the task-driven manager whose job it is to stop lazy people being lazy. That person is no longer required. These workers are highly motivated. They're motivated because their next gig depends on how well they perform this time round. They are passionate about what they do. They are on a path to mastery. And they're not in it for a career for life. They are looking at a life of careers. So the question is, how long can you make this person stick around so that you both maximize the value of working together, so to speak? So culture. Culture was very easy to manage in a day when we lived in a fortress. They were on the outside, we were on the inside. Similarly with factories, we were on the inside, they were on the outside. But now what with outsourcing, extranets, crowdsourcing, freelancers, and crowdsourcing, essentially the walls have become blurred. It's not clear where our business ends and the market starts. Think of it as a railway station. Imagine the owner of the railway station, the chief executive of the railway station, coming out at peak time and saying, right, guys, today we're all off to London. Well, people would turn around and they'd say, no, I'm on my own path to mastery. I happen to be using your station because it's convenient at this point in time to get me where I need to go. So essentially, culture is now starting to change, and it's becoming more nebulous to some extent because of the number of transient people who will be part of the organization at any given time. So, how many of us got 0 out of 10 when we were at school for our homework or our schoolwork? Some of us did, some of us didn't. But we've all been part of a conspiracy. And that conspiracy, which has been propagated often by parents, bosses, and teachers, is that the path to success involves the avoidance of failure. And that avoidance of failure has led to us being very conservative in how we go about running our lives and running our businesses. This doesn't work in the digital age, because in the digital age, we learn through discovery, and through discovering, we have to take chances. Sometimes we will fail. Fail is an inevitable part of moving forward. The whole lean startup model, as used in Silicon Valley and beyond, is predicated on failure and learning from that failure and moving off in a direction that is again exploratory, but will hopefully take us further towards our goals. This changes everything. Essentially, risk management in the digital age is to do more with the acquisition of risk than the elimination and if you like, avoidance of it. And this is typified by this particular picture here of what might be considered the chief finance officer or the chief risk officer. Their approach to risk, again, is to avoid, eliminate, or minimize. We have to change our attitudes to this. This has an impact very much on regulated businesses as well. Some of you are thinking, well, that doesn't apply to my business. Well, the regulators are starting to recognize this, and they are starting to run their regulatory bodies like lean startups. And that makes things very, very interesting. Essentially, the regulators are becoming increasingly the partners of the businesses, because together the game is to provide better services for your citizens and consumers, because if they can get better return on their tax dollars, they will go elsewhere. You may or may not recognize this. This is a typical obstacle course where people are out in their own free time racing across different obstacles in the wild terrain, so to speak. Albeit enacted, essentially what these people are doing, they are reliving their hunter-gatherer past. They're engaging with the environment in real time. They're getting bruised, they're getting hurt. They will tell their war stories when they get to work after the weekend. But many of us deep down, all of us deep down, have a need to be curious, have a need to be courageous, to explore, to fail again. If it wasn't for our curious and courageous ancestors, we wouldn't be able to conduct this webinar today. So it's in our nature to be exploratory. It's in our nature to be hunter-gatherers, in effect. So anything we can do in our organizations to support people in terms of, if you like, replicating that lifestyle, that way of existing, and a way that our brain is still wired. Human adaptations take around 25,000 years to take place. Well, only 12,000 years ago, we were hunter-gatherers, and some of us still are. So the very nature of risk is changing. So I have given you the strong impression that what's happening here is that mankind is returning to his or her true nature. But there's a little bit of a twist. As portables become wearables, as wearables become embeddables, the internet moves to the Internet of Things, to the Internet of Things in people. We are on a convergence course with humanity, with technology. And that convergence course started all those years ago when mankind first picked up the rock. We have been augmenting ourselves with technology. Today, the mobile phone is the digital hunter-gatherer's spear. I would go as far as to say that we are experiencing a species transformation, a move from Homo sapiens to Homo extensis, or augmented man. And this augmentation is going to continue at an exponential rate. So it's going to be profound, the changes we see over the next few years. So as well as witnessing an economic step change, we may well be witnessing an anthropological step change that's been in progress for quite a few thousand years now. Now, whether we like it or not, and whether we become robots or cyborgs or not, the robots are coming. We are seeing them in hotels, warehouses, factories, old people's homes, and in restaurants. Though recently some robots got sacked for what might be described as soup delivery mismanagement. The robots are getting increasingly intelligent and emotionally intelligent. So when your robot co-worker winks at you, is that because there is a bug in its software, or it's trying to deepen the emotional bond with you so that work becomes more pleasurable for you, or is it winking because it's learned everything it needs to know about your job and now you are no longer needed? In any case, we have to decide who's going to own the robots. Is it a HR function? Is it an IT function? We need to integrate the architecture, the robotic architecture, into our security architectures, our data architectures, our business models. People born today will enter a world of work where, according to the University of Oxford, 50% of the work will be done by robots. And no doubt within their generation, they will see the end of work in terms of the need for humans. This is not something we have to concern ourselves with this very second, but as a society, we do need to keep this in mind. Whether we like it or not, the robots are coming, and it would be wise to embrace them. So I'm now going to turn towards a business template for the future. And this business template I've documented in a book called Biz 4.0. And essentially, the model that I'm going to present to you will help you play a role in being strategically relevant to your organization, because I believe this is a model that organizations need to move towards. Before I do that, I want to break down the digital age into three phases. Firstly, we have industrial digital. This is where we have industrial era organizations doing digital projects around the organization, but they're not fundamentally changing the business model. So this can be considered as makeup or lipstick in terms of the business model. It doesn't have a long-term future, but it makes people feel as if they are addressing digital, but they are seeing digital as some sort of superficial, new channel to market, or move a couple of the app services into a kind of app mode. Digital is much deeper than that, as we will see. What we want to get to eventually will be human digital, where we recognize that we can harness the power of humans, their cognitive capacity, to really make a difference in terms of customer experience. And we will maximize our human capability using digital technologies. I think this is going to keep us busy for the next decade or two. But eventually we're going to come to full digital again, where even where we're working at the peak of our cognitive capacity, the robots can still do a better job than us, and at less cost and with less fuss. So that is, again, something we need to keep in mind, but human digital is where I believe we should be aiming for at this point in time. So we've talked about the anthropological drivers already. Many of these I have mentioned. I introduced creativity and curiosity and courage when I talked about risk. I would also include spirituality that may not have a religious significance in terms of formal religion, but at the very least, people are going to be turning up to work and thinking, what is the purpose of this organization? Do I want to be associated with the purpose of this organization? Is this organization immoral in some way or other in terms of what it delivers? Do I want to be a part of that? So spirituality, I think, is going to move increasingly center stage within organizations across the world. So if we regard these as the 9 anthropological drivers, the extent to which we can weave these in to the day-to-day lives of our workers will be the extent to which we help to maximize their cognitive capacity. There is a strong correlation between cognitive capacity and creativity. And there's a strong correlation between creativity and great customer experiences. And in any case, today, creativity is one of the few areas where we can excel beyond the capabilities of robots and algorithms. So this is our competitive advantage, so to speak. Now, when it comes to business, businesses generally are in the business of making a profit. Smart businesses are in the business of making a profit, but growing their assets as well. The most important of which is financial capital. So once you grow your financial capital, whether you're a for-profit company or not-for-profit company, you can still use that money to buy or to make good things happen. So financial capital, think of it as cash or cash equivalents. With good financial capital, you can please shareholders. You can acquire the best talent. You can spend money on innovation. You can acquire other organizations, and you can build a war chest for the uncertain future that lies ahead. There is, of course, physical capital. This is the money tied up in those elements that are needed to run the business, the buildings, the machinery, the vehicles, the land. Technology can be used here to make sure that we maximize the value of that physical capital. As we move into the digital age, the name of the game is not to increase the physical capital, but to decrease it. So acquiring things as a service, as opposed to buying things, is going to be increasingly important. So if it increases in value, buy it, it's an asset. If it decreases in value, for example, technology, rent it. Looking now at some intangible assets, brand capital. With good brand capital, in essence, you can get greater customer loyalty and the customers are less price sensitive. So the more we can grow our brand capital, the more we will in turn grow our financial capital. Similarly, intellectual capital, which is made up, amongst other things, of intellectual property and human capital. If we work on our people and create an environment for them to thrive in, then they are more likely to generate the intellectual property and the automated services, which in themselves are assets, that again will fuel financial capital. The new kid on the block is data capital. Many organizations are sitting on an oil field in terms of data. Data is the fuel that drives data-driven organizations, and data-driven organizations are the organizations of the digital age. You need to have the drilling equipment, you need to have the refining equipment. This data capital can be used to generate insight through analytics tools. Through collaborative tools, it can be turned into knowledge. That knowledge can be turned into wisdom. That wisdom can be turned into better business decisions. And better business decisions lead to greater financial capital. So the Biz 4.0 model is all about growing your assets. Smart organizations grow assets because assets themselves generate capital. It's more than just profit and loss. So now I'm going to look at the success factors associated with a digital age business. And again, this is all documented in the Biz 4.0 book. I'm just going to skirt over it at this stage. And what I've done here is I've looked at research associated with tribal behavior and identified the 5 following characteristics. Smart organizations and smart tribes pay attention, whether it's the snapping of a twig, the growling of a bear, whether it's a threat or opportunities. Organizations that are able to pay attention are most likely to survive and thrive. So this takes us into the world of Internet of Things, sensors, and analytics tools. Smart organizations are essentially ambitious. They have a sense of purpose. They can bring everybody together under a common esprit de corps. If everybody's agreed on the way forward, you are more likely to reach your goals. And in this day and age, to do it in an innovative manner. Tribes value artistry. If you're going to be a member of a tribe, you need to bring something to the table. You need to be an asset to the tribe. If you're not, you are consuming tribal resources, and that's not good. So tribes value artistry. That artistry could be as a hunter, as a gatherer, as a warrior. So we are on a path to mastery increasingly, and you might say this is a path to artistry as well. Tribes are adaptable. They operate in an unforgiving terrain that can change at any time. We live in a world where there is war, terrorism, natural disasters, currency fluctuations, resource shortages, talent shortages. So there's a number of macroeconomic factors that are changing the pitch, changing the arena for us. The business we're in today is not necessarily the business we're going to be in next year or the year after. So our ability to adapt is critical to our survival. And finally, smart tribes add value. They are thinking beyond simply living long enough to create the next generation. In essence, what they are doing is they will be growing assets. And in effect, today, that means building intellectual property and creating automated services. These are the ways in which we will increasingly add value to ourselves and to the market. And we need to have a development methodology that reflects the variability of the market. And again, that boils down to the lean startup approach. So these are the 5 success factors. These will be incorporated into the organization in terms of business processes. The question we must ask is, how do these map onto the traditional functional model of marketing, sales, finance, and so on? Well, perhaps the more fundamental question is, how do tribes structure themselves? Do tribes have a marketing function or a HR function, and so on? And remember, tribes have got a much better track record in terms of being an economic model than the departmental model we've experienced during the 200 short years of the industrial era. So the blueprint essentially has people at the center of it. We're meeting their anthropological needs. We're incorporating these processes so that we behave more like a tribe. And in turn, we generate capital, which goes on to give us a sustainable existence. So this is the blueprint. So to round up, we need to build the workplace around our anthropological needs, around the anthropological needs of our workers. We need to enable them to be mobile, social, creative, and so on. That way, we will get the best from them. The more comfortable they feel in their day-to-day activities, the more we will get from them in terms of value, so to speak, and everyone will be happy. We need to turn data into capital. Again, data-driven businesses, this is how they're going to operate. If you don't have data coming in from the outside world, you are flying blind. And in the fog of war, that is not a good thing. So our ability to take raw data from sensors, from our own people, from third-party feeds and so on, build a coherent data model, and from that extract ultimately wisdom and better decisions, that is what's required to turn this raw material into capital. And for those of you who work in the technology department, so to speak, this is a way to increase your strategic relevance. Salespeople get paid a lot. Salespeople enjoy a higher level of respect because there's a very strong correlation between what they do and financial capital. Technologists have an opportunity to turn data capital into something that makes them strategically relevant, because data capital fuels all the other forms of capital that lead to greater financial capital. And I've touched on cognitive capacity. So I'm talking about our brain power. So we are all inherently creative, though our schooling and maybe our education, our higher education, and maybe we were recruited because we wouldn't be creative, because we were to follow the ops manual in some capacity. But deep down, we are all creative. You look at any child, any toddler, before they've hit school age, you will watch them being curious, you'll watch them being courageous, you'll watch them fail as they stand up and fall down, stand up and fall down. They're determined to walk. We need to rekindle that in ourselves. We need to rekindle that in our people so we can harness this creative energy to create great customer experiences that command a very high margin. So, to summarize, the world is changing, the world of work is changing, the very nature of humanity is changing. We've seen exponential growth in terms of our augmentation, but now we are moving from the IT or the information technology era, the 20th century, to the biological era, the 21st century. So we will see some dramatic changes in terms of augmentation. What with the arrival of genomics, bionics, bioinformatics, and even nootropics. This is going to have a profound impact on humanity. It's going to have a profound impact on us as service providers, as consumers, as citizens, and in that most exacting of leadership science, parenting. My belief is that I encourage you to make nature your business partner. If you embrace this anthropological reality, you too will be able to thrive in the digital age. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Ade. Folks, we are now open for question and answers. If you have any questions, you can always raise your hand, or you could equally post your questions in the question box. And let me go to the question box. There are a couple of them already posted. First one, in your view, what is the impact of digitization in coming days on the life-work balance?
Well, again, for me, work-life balance is a concept that was coined in the industrial era because we fundamentally didn't enjoy what we did. As we enter the digital era, the only way that we will stay in play is if we are performing at the top of our abilities. And the only way we can perform at the top of our abilities is if we're passionate about what we do. And if we're passionate about what we do, and we are judged on our performance, not our activities, then the notion of work-life balance disappears. It becomes work-life integration. I don't mind working at 11 o'clock at night if it's to meet a certain goal. If I can do what other people take a day to do in an hour, that's my benefit. I'm being paid now for the outcomes. So I think as we move towards a more outcome-based form of remuneration, the work-life balance concept will evaporate. So I think, you know, and maybe I'm being a little bit semantic here, but really work-life balance as a concept relates to a model where the employee and the employer are, you might say, against each other. In the digital age, I believe we'll increasingly see the role becoming more like athlete and coach. We're both on the same side. We want to go in the same direction. So whatever it takes to make me better is, I'm happy, you know, if that makes the organization better as well.
Okay, thank you very much. There's a supplementary sort of question. How challenging it has become for leaders to cope up with information overload and managing the flow of workload with it?
None of us, there's no playbook for managing information in the digital age. So many of us are stressed out because there is just so much to consume, whether it's the latest, you know, management books or what Netflix or YouTube has to offer. And all of this, to some extent, contributes to addictive behavior. So this addictive behavior results in increasing serotonin and dopamine hits to our brain. So to some extent, we become addicted to the bleep of our phone or the latest management book or the latest thing on television. We're only now just starting to realize that that's an addictive behavior. And in essence, what we have to do is go on a low dopamine, low serotonin, well, probably more low dopamine than anything else, diet. So you have to learn how to get through the day without needing these little neurotransmitter hits, so to speak. So that's an issue we all face. And even when we control our, let's say, information diet and it's all good, we run into the same problems. Because if you spend too much time exploring and not enough time exploiting, you become a very well-read leader who is not doing anything in practice. And really, in the digital age, it's all about execution and movement. Our brains were designed for movement more so than thinking. So I think we need to get a better balance, perhaps, between execution and, if you like, analysis and research and so on. Now, there's another part of that question that related to workflow, which I didn't quite catch.
Yeah, in fact, the question was that, yes, there's information overload, and how do you foresee this as a challenge for managing the flow of workload with it?
Well, the idea of a leader is not to be doing the work of the workers, it's to delegate the work, and for the leader to be focused on what lies on the horizon as opposed to what is happening during the day. Admittedly, the horizon is getting shorter, so that almost tactics and strategy start to blur. But when you've got people who are all agreed on the way forward, all excellent at what they do, then it should not lie on the shoulders of one man or one woman to make all of these decisions. Again, this takes us back to a kind of tribal council approach to running the organization. And essentially, one might say that if a leader feels overwhelmed, it is because they have not delegated appropriately, or perhaps getting too tied up with operational detail.
Thank you very much. And we have another last question. In this era of global village and with an ease of rapidly increasing approach towards outsourcing methodologies, what hindrances do you foresee in managing cultural sensitivities to ensure productivity is not compromised?
Well, I think outsourcing has its definite benefits, and one should give the work to the people that can do it at the best rate and the best quality, whatever factors are important to you. So this is inevitable. The notion of a permanent job where your employer in a kind of paternal manner protects you from society and ensures that once you get on a particular career conveyor belt, you will rise up the social ladder, so to speak, and enjoy an increasingly affluent quality of life, is disappearing. I work with a number of professional services firms, and they typically have a model whereby the first half of your career is spent subsidizing the senior partners. You work really hard to make them money, and you do so because eventually you'll become a senior partner and you'll make the next generation make your money. But that model's collapsing now, so that's an uncomfortable feeling. But to come back to the question, essentially, whatever it takes to get the job done, the mix within organizations will not definitely, I can't say that for sure, but what we will see is a decrease in fully permanent employees. We will see flexi permanent, so for example, alumni coming back and helping from time to time. We will see freelancers who are coming in on a project basis for a week or two or a month or two, and then we'll see the gig workers who come in on, for a few minutes because they're going to deliver something, or a few hours or a day at most. Now, if you can give some of those activities to a third-party organization that is designed and motivated to deliver such, let's say, non-core services, it makes eminent sense to give it to those organizations. And if that hurts the feelings of the permanent stuff, so to speak, then they need, in my view, to be made aware of what's happening in the world and how the world is changing. When I was, there was a time when if you went to work for IBM, that was like, that's you sorted for life and beyond retirement. And then one day IBM sacked somebody, and that maybe was the start of the new world that we live in. That even permanent employment is more precarious than being a freelance hunter-gatherer. At least being a freelance hunter-gatherer, you wake up every morning and feel the cold winds of commercial reality, and you essentially only eat what you kill. My view is that we need to get people comfortable with being hunter-gatherers.
Well, thank you very much, and that really brings us towards the end of the webinar. Any concluding remarks that you would like to give, Mr. Ade, before we dismiss out?
No, well, not really. I mean, I've thrown a lot at you guys in this short time we've had together, so there's probably a lot to think about. But the beauty of all of this is that we are returning to our true nature. And if we're willing to rekindle some of our natural characteristics, particularly creativity and courage, I would say, then, you know, it's going to be a fun ride ahead. But again, we are out in the savannah, and it's an uncertain, volatile, and fundamentally malevolent environment. So we need to be on guard, we need to pay attention, we need to sharpen our tools, so to speak. But it's a land of opportunity.
Indeed, a land of opportunity. So thank you very much for your very, very valuable information that you delivered through this live webinar. So I really want to thank you on behalf of the Madinah Institute for Leadership and Entrepreneurship for taking the time to deliver this live webinar. So thank you very much, Mr. Ade McCormack. So,
you're welcome.
And thank you all of those who attended this webinar. Please stay tuned to webinar.mile.org to learn about our upcoming programs, webinars, and to access the recorded version. For that note, I would like to end and conclude. So you all have a good day, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you're calling from. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Thank you very much.